Welcome to the most scholarly committee in the Nevada State Legislature, the Assembly Committee on Education. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Assembly members De Silva, Dahlia, DeLong, Flanagan, Hanson, Hardy, Hunt, Koenig, LaRue Hatch, Mosca, Orentlicker, and Chair Torres Fawcett.
Here, and please mark Assemblymember Hanson absent excused. Welcome to the audience here in Carson City and those joining us via video conference and those in Las Vegas. Shout out to our YouTube followers. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Just a couple housekeeping items. Please silence your electronic devices. If you wish to testify, please sign in at the table by the door and provide a business card to the committee secretary. For those joining online, please be sure to mute your microphone when you are not speaking to minimize any background noise. When testifying, please turn on the microphone and clearly state your name, spell your name, and state your affiliation, if any, for the record. Then turn the microphone off each time you are done speaking. Handouts should be provided to our committee staff in advance. We expect courtesy and respect in our interactions during the meeting, even if we do not agree with another person's position. Committee members will be using their laptops throughout the meeting. Please do not take any offense. This is how we view our committee documents. Public comment will be taken at the end of the meeting. Each person will be limited to 2 minutes. In addition, the public may submit written testimony to the committee up to 24 hours after the hearing. At the bill sponsor's request, AB 195 was removed from the agenda. So if you were here to testify in support or opposition to AB 195, please note that that bill has been pulled from the agenda at this time. Today, we will be having a presentation from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, Moving Nevada Forward Educator Apprenticeship Pathways, and we'll be hearing a piece of legislation. Thank you so much, TNOV, for being patient with the snow last week. I know that you already were in town when we had called a snow day, and then you no longer had the opportunity to present. So thank you for rescheduling and being here with us. So at this time, I'll invite you forward for the presentation. I don't usually support the Rebels, but today, go Rebels. Thank you to all the work y'all are doing.
Well, thank you, Chair Fawcett. Kenny Varner for the record.
And Jeff Shee for the record.
And thank you for having us back. The snow day was very fun indeed, and we got to learn all about how Southwest deals with weather, so it was fun. Thank you for taking some time to talk with us today, and a lot of what we're going to share comes from work that started prior to last session and was really enhanced last session with a lot of feedback from both Assembly and Senate. And we want to share a little bit about what's going on with apprenticeships and hopefully leave the presentation with some food for thought about things that you're all considering this session that will help continue to reduce teacher shortages while ensuring that the teachers that we do prepared are there to be retained for the long haul. Just as a little context, registered apprenticeships have become very popular throughout the U.S. Over 40 states have registered apprenticeships, and there's two ways that can happen. The Office of Apprenticeship, some states run through the federal government, others are called SAA states, State Apprenticeship Agency states. Nevada is one of those states. So we are approved and registered through the State Apprenticeship Agency. And an apprenticeship in the state of Nevada and in Las Vegas, the state director of apprenticeships is attending as well, so she's there watching. But through their office, we submitted an application to become an apprenticeship and grew rather rapidly. So what we're going to share with you today actually results in us being the largest apprenticeship in the entire U.S., and has been determined by the American Federation of Teachers as the gold standard for apprenticeships. So that's really exciting. And what distinguishes an apprenticeship from other ways of preparing teachers? Sometimes we hear people using the word apprenticeship, and what they're telling you is that they're doing an extended residency or student teaching, and that's not what we mean. An apprenticeship is a theory of how we address workforce shortage by embedding on-the-job learning tied to the related technical instruction that people get. So we combine the two, And part of the purpose of this is to keep people employed. Prior to the last session, teachers in Nevada couldn't remain employed while doing student teaching. And luckily, through the work that you all did, that has changed. And we wanted to be able to leverage that to say that most people can't afford not to work in order to pursue a passion and or their calling. So not only does it allow people to work, it allows us, and what you're going to see when we share, is a grow your own approach. Throughout Nevada, there are many paraprofessionals, school support staff, bus drivers, lunch people, office workers who've made lifelong commitments to their school settings, but haven't had a pathway to completing a bachelor's while remaining employed that would allow them to become licensed. And the apprenticeship approach allows them to remain employed, use that on-the-job learning time, coupled with our work as the sponsor to provide instruction. What we've learned in doing this work that we want to share with you, what's made this successful, first of all, it has statewide reach. When we started prior to becoming an apprenticeship, we started with 36 apprentices in Clark County. At the time, they were just pre-service teachers in this novel idea of trying to accelerate the pathway while allowing people to remain working. And now we're happy to report that there are apprentices in every single assembly and Senate district in the state of Nevada through our program. Every one of your constituent, not everyone is an apprentice, that was silly. All of your districts, every one of you has apprenticeships in our program, which makes this a statewide impact. And that's really important. And we'll talk to you about the distribution of that later. But it was really important to understand that the needs in this state aren't just singular. Rural communities also aren't singular, and that there are a lot of nuanced needs that need to be responded to in each area of the state in different ways. It's partnership oriented, so it's not this traditional approach where UNLV prepares you and then the district deals with you. First of all, the whole idea is that as the employer, the district, and us as the sponsor work together, and we do this in partnership with community organizations and agencies to make sure that the whole community is invested in the preparation pathway. The on-the-job learning is really important. A lot of times teacher prep can be very disconnected from a work setting. A lot of what happens, many of you in this committee are educators, but if you prepared a traditional way, how I was, you took a bunch of classes, you had a few weeks of pretend teaching through student teaching, you're in somebody's room, and then they said, you're a teacher now. You didn't even see a whole school year. So I student taught in the fall. I didn't know how to close a school year. People that student teach in the spring don't really understand what it means to open a school year. So this embedded on-the-job learning over the course of multiple years facilitates teachers feeling more confident. It also, because it's statewide, had to be flexible and responsive to the communities. So we work in an online model that allows people in Oahe, all the way on the northern border with Idaho, to attend just as easily UNLV as someone who might be in Clark County. And even for our friends in Clark County, what we realize is if you live in Lone Mountain, coming to UNLV's campus can still be quite a drive. And so what we want to do is facilitate ways that are flexible. Also, most of the programs offer classes during the day, so it's nice to say you can keep working, but if we offer our classes from 10 to 11:30 during your workday, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So we wanted to respond to folks. Also, what's really interesting and cool from our perspective about how apprenticeships work in the state of Nevada is that they require no out-of-pocket expenses for the apprentice for their instruction, meaning that the challenge on us was to find ways to pay for the tuition and fees and not visit that. So the people are not only working in our apprenticeship and staying employed, they're not accruing debt through the traditional way of attending college. We're paying for the full cost, and we don't get a discount. We pay the full price to UNLV for their work. So this isn't a free program, it's a program that we're taking care of the cost. We also provide concierge services. What we found in working with people who are non-traditional in their pathways is that a lot of the bureaucracy of higher ed makes it very difficult to complete a degree. It's no wonder that as many as 5 in every 10 Nevadans don't finish a degree that they start within 6 years, because the bureaucracy of figuring out all of the offices on campus can really be overwhelming. So we deploy a concierge team that takes care of all those logistics for the students so that what they're working on as apprentices is their coursework and their on-the-job learning. And finally, we provide long-term support. Most of us that are teachers know that just finishing your program, the first 3 years are really difficult, and it's where we see the largest exodus of teachers is in that first 3 years. They just don't know how to navigate, and the universities typically cut them off and say, we hope you have a great career and you're now the responsibility of your district. We provide 3 years of ongoing support as part of this apprenticeship commitment to make sure that we're in community with those apprentices and their districts for the long term.
Jeff Shee for the record. So my day job is I'm a mathematics educator. So here are the numbers for you all. Okay. So currently the program has served 1,200 apprentices, and the numbers on the right are pretty good grades, right? So 97.6% graduation rate and a 95% retention rate. I want to call attention to the retention rate. I'm wearing my other hat. So my role in the Dean's Office is student and community engagement. I think that one of the really powerful aspects of this program is the emphasis on community, right? We're getting people that are parts of these communities and they're staying, right? So you all know that one of the big issues with teacher workforce shortages is the notion that they leave after 3 years, whereas all of our data so far is showing that they're staying, okay? Over 65% of our apprentices are from underrepresented groups as well. Okay, 750 licensed teachers. All right, and that's on top. On top of that, we have another 833 that we're going to be adding at the end of this year. Okay, I want to emphasize here that these are in addition to all of the teachers that we're already producing in traditional pathways. Okay. I have more fun numbers. Of those 833, 260 of them are in your districts. Okay, so that's 31.2% if you don't want to do that math. Okay, and 129 of the 372, 34.7% are graduates and alumni.
Now we're going to show you a quick demonstration of the impact, and I'm actually going to go here first. Oh, sorry, Kenny Werner for the record. We wanted to heat map to give you a sense of how this impacts the state. So when we zoom out, the heat map here shows you the impact of our apprentices statewide. We have this link that we've shared with your committee representatives as well so that you can have this. We have this broken down by assembly district and Senate district. So you can click on your district and hone in. So Chair Torres Fawcett, your district number is 3. So if we go to 3. We can actually zoom in. Oh, my tech skills are terrible. I'm not the technology professor. Oh, you know what? We can use the mouse. And we can start to see in greater detail how this impacts schools within each person's district and where the concentration of them are. And this is great, and we hope that we don't want to go through everybody's district, but we hope that you spend the time to go through your districts, because from Churchill to Clark to Esmeralda to White Pine to Elko to Nye County and Clark, obviously Washoe as well, we're all over the state with this program. What's really cool So this is for the assembly. We can actually start to show you the schools in your district that are the most impacted and which one are Title I's. The overwhelming majority of these schools served our Title I schools where they've had the hardest time keeping teacher retention. So for example, I'm going to go to Member Koenig's district, and we have your face there, so you get to see yourselves when you click because everybody likes that. So you'll be able to see yourself and the top apprenticeship sites within your area and which ones are Title I schools. These are schools you're going to be familiar with. They're your constituents. You represent the folks in these areas, and that was really important for us. So we don't want to belabor this with the little time that we have, but we're sharing this resource so that as you talk to your constituents, you can see the impact it's made in each of your areas and the schools that it's made the impact on. And with the permission of the chair, we're going to show just a short little video that gives you a little sense. What we learn in expanding through the whole state is how the north of Nevada also really could benefit from this program. So a lot of who's featured in this program represent Washoe and Elko counties, as well as Oahe.
What we've seen is that the interest is actually growing. A lot of our students that are in the classroom are sharing how great this program is with their colleagues that are in a similar position.
Our GPAs are similar, but our graduation rates are much higher. The student experience is more positive. They're reporting better engagement, and we're seeing those results with local school districts who are saying these apprentices are making a huge difference.
The apprenticeship program through Nevada Forward must be prioritized in our state if we want to keep gaining as a leader in education in the United States. One challenge that comes with grant funding is that you have to wait for deadlines and applications, and then things aren't as secure. If we want this to be sustainable, we have to make sure that districts and higher ed know that that funding is there. When we look at the impact of the apprenticeship program and that it's working and that it's really standing out in the nation, let's be a leader.
If the funding were to go away for these types of programs, I really want to ask some policymakers, how do you expect me to do my job? I am tasked with providing my students a safe, productive, positive environment where high quality student-centered instruction occurs. I need teachers.
Without funding and support, this program wouldn't exist. I'd have paraprofessionals into perpetuity. They wouldn't have the opportunity to self-actualize. And our kiddos would continue to struggle in classrooms that don't have fully certified, licensed, and trained educators. So everybody benefits.
When you offer programs in an innovative way, when you remove the financial barriers, students can graduate. And so what we've learned from that is that this is a scalable model.
Nevada is growing, Nevada is changing, the needs of Nevada are changing. Our higher ed institutions need to be in touch with those who are really feeling some of those pain points.
I've always envisioned Nevada Forward to be a workforce hub, and now that we learn the secrets of what makes this work, we can look at other workforce shortages in the state.
How do we make sure that or find creative ways to get more nurses, to get more doctors? UNLV, UNR, TMCC, Great Basin, all the different universities, we don't have the capacity to turn out enough teachers to even support our state.
This is just the tip of the iceberg of how we can think about partnerships with our higher ed institutions moving forward as a larger community and engine of economic growth and development, and creating those infrastructure and career pathways for the future Nevadans.
UNLV College of Education is a college about education for all. And what we are concerned with ultimately is increasing access to higher education so that we can build the workforce that Nevada needs for tomorrow.
Kenny Varner for the record. So as we wrap up our time, we want to leave you with 5 pieces of food for thought in this session as you're considering various things that can help facilitate this type of work. It's critically important as various pathway bills come before you and pathway opportunities that we keep thinking about pathways across the full spectrum. 428 was passed last session, and that's really important for the youth piece, and we want to continue to see that work grow. And we also need pieces that help continue for the adult side of this and the non-traditional side of this. The sustained funding, something that we've talked with the legislature about before. Programs like Teach Nevada are really important and great, but they have to continue to be a strong return on investment. They haven't always been. What we're really doing by using a last dollar approach to make sure that we weave various types of funding is making sure that every penny you as a legislature invest in teacher preparation is used wisely and with the best return on investment. That sustained funding is necessary, but we also want to couple that with this return on investment idea, and that we want you to ask us as a higher ed institution and all of our companions and districts, what is the return on investment? When we see 95% retention and 97.6% graduation rate, we're actually opening up a conversation about a return on investment that's really important. We also, as you've considered very generously in the past early childhood, we are, and we didn't say this at the beginning, our pathways are early childhood, elementary, and special ed with the apprenticeship. Early childhood expansion is incredible, but if it doesn't come with capital investment, it also isn't going to make a lot of sense. There just aren't enough early childhood facilities statewide to really handle the needs that communities have in ensuring that that early childhood experience is robust. And we want to continue to encourage you to hold all of the entities from us as higher ed institutions, NDE, the school districts, everyone accountable to understand that the goal here is to reduce barriers, not create new ones. So as you're considering changes to licensure, one of the things we were able to do is work towards an apprentice license that helps reduce the barrier of fingerprinting and the overwhelming burden of cost every time you have to keep switching your licenses. We can think win-win and have accountability that also reduces barriers. What our apprentices will tell you on any day is that what makes this work for them is that we've removed the barriers out of the way. We don't give them anything they didn't already have inside of them. We're just trying to clear the barriers for them. This really is about them. Nevada has a really strong, talented group of people who already live and work in the communities and schools that you represent, and programs like Nevada Forward are really helping to create a vehicle for them to finally get a degree and be able to then work as a licensed teacher. And we thank you for your time.
Thank you. Before we go into questions, can you just provide some clarifying information for the committee on like the differences between the undergraduate program that you have and then the advanced ARL program that you have? Thank you.
Kenny Varner for the record, Chair Torres Fawcett. Just to clarify, we wanted to make sure we stayed under our 15 minutes, so we went really fast. We have 3 viable pathways in the apprenticeship. We actually have a youth apprenticeship that is aligned to AB 428 from the last session. That allows youth in this state to earn up to 36 credits while having summer on-the-job learning through youth apprenticeships and be able to enter college in a much stronger position at a much better rate financially than if they were doing this once they finished high school. And then our 2 main apprenticeships that are registered as apprenticeships is an undergraduate pathway. And the undergraduate pathway works in 2 divisions. There's a pre-apprenticeship for those that are under 60 hours or under that don't have an associate's degree. We realized very early on that for some people, they just didn't even have enough credits to get into the apprenticeship track, and we created a parallel pre-apprenticeship that does the same thing for them, but allows all those gen ed classes to get done so that they're at the level of what would have been an associate's degree. And the apprenticeship itself at the undergraduate level is for those that have either their gen eds completed or an associate's degree from an NSHE institution. And then on the graduate side, it was really interesting that we learned along the way, there are many people in this state who have a bachelor's degree, not in education, that work in schools in supportive roles that also couldn't be licensed. And the ARL programs, while important and viable, weren't necessarily everyone's best pathway in terms of balancing the on-the-job part of this. So we have what we call the graduate apprenticeship track, which allows them with a bachelor's, they can actually obtain an ARL license and be teacher of record. That's just in line with how the state works. But by being in the apprenticeship, we're able to then seed in all of the coursework through the on-the-job learning, provide the professional development, 3 years post-program support. The difference is that the graduates need about 36 credits, where the undergraduates need about 60. They're doing that in the same time frame. So in a lot of ways, the undergrads, they all do well in the program, but the undergrads have to sort of demonstrate an extra set of grit because they're doing a little bit more. And it's worth knowing that our GPAs in these apprenticeship programs are not only similar to our traditional students, they're slightly higher in both cases. So there isn't a performance issue. Their satisfaction with the courses is much higher than our traditional students.
Thank you. And with that, let's go ahead and go into questions. Assemblymember Mosca.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate you. And I want to really give some big congratulations to both of you. I'm pretty sure it's correct that this bill did not pass last session, right?
Kenny Varner for the record. A bill didn't pass last session, but we weren't an apprenticeship. And actually, Tony Gins at the State Office of the Labor Commissioner reached out after that session and sort of said, Plan B, you are doing this work of an apprenticeship. And that's where we became educated on how this was aligned. And, you know, things happen the way they happen. And so we make the best with what we have, and we want to keep moving forward. That's why we call it Nevada Forward.
And that's why I want to give you big congratulations, because I know you've been working on it for almost now 3 years, and is a good example of if we don't get it passed up here, we still got to get it done. So I want to first thank you for that. And I know, just knowing the program and a lot of the dynamics, that a lot of it is federal funding. So I'd love to just kind of hear what is happening, knowing what is happening in the national scene when it comes to federal funding and how that may impact you.
Through Chair Torres Fawcett to Assemblymember Mosca.
Please feel free to go directly to the members.
Okay, thank you. I was like, I asked Kanani, I want to do this the right way. So Thank you. So Assemblymember Mosca, actually our funding formula is really interesting. 75% of it actually comes from, 75% of what's not federal comes from the legislature. So we're last dollar. What that means is that we apply all Pell, and any entitlements that any student in Nevada would have just as a mechanism of being a student in Nevada, Millennium, Tuition Plus, anything like that is applied first, no loans. And then the remainder of the tuition and fees, which is last dollar at that point, comes from predominantly Teach Nevada and incentivizing pathways to teaching. The part that those bills don't account for is the staffing. These concierge services and the staffing is part of what makes this successful. We knew that Teach Nevada in itself wasn't moving the needle. Just giving scholarship money wasn't what was really the thing. And so that 25% comes from other sources that are not legislatively funded through federal funding as well.
Thank you for that. And again, I want to congratulate that braided funding. And we hope with things that are coming down to us here as a state that, of course, this hopefully program won't be impacted as much. And I think by having braided funding really puts you in a good position. So thank you, and thank you, UNLV.
Vice Chair DeSilva.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Dean Vonner and Dean Shee, for coming back. The deans are in the building, y'all. So my question is about paraprofessionals. And I know that the program has a role for paraprofessionals. So my question really is, how does the program work with paraprofessionals, and why is it important to actually have paraprofessionals as part of this this apprenticeship program? Thank you.
Assemblymember De Silva. So how we work with anyone who is a school support staff member, regardless of their designation, but you bring up a point, which is that paraprofessionals are different than school bus drivers, are different than people in lunch room. So with paraprofessionals, they're often already in a classroom assistive position. They're often in classroom. And so we're able to do the on-the-job learning with them by embedding in their natural work context at first, and then progressively increasing the amount of responsibility they have through the end of an entire academic year, through the program. We don't want to pull them out of their settings necessarily, because that isn't advantageous to the school either. So we work with each school and the principals to understand what's the best combination of time that gives them progressive a journey. In apprenticeship world, they're with journey workers, so people who've been 3 or more years in the profession. We see this as a journey. So paraprofessionals that have more like classroom aid access are different than paraprofessionals who might be a one-on-one type of aid. School bus drivers are another really interesting example. They drive their morning run. They park in front of an elementary school. They go in for 2, 3, 4 hours, work with the kids, go back and do their afternoon run. Because the whole idea is this has to stay win-win for everyone. They have to remain employed. The school district still needs them to do their job. And so what we do is also not only a braided approach to the funding, it's a braided approach to the experience. Not everyone starts off with the same amount of experience. We start where they are, and we progressively move them up until the point where they're all then, towards the end of the program, establishing that more full-day routine of teacher.
Members, any additional questions? It doesn't appear that there are any additional questions, but I just really want to thank you for the implementation of this program. I mean, I have a very big supporter and recruiter for this program. I know a number of teachers in this program, including several family members, and I've taught in the program. My mom's taught in the program, so I think it's phenomenal, and I think it's really going to help fill the gaps in getting people that want to be in the classroom, want to work in the classroom, but then also getting them that experience in the classroom. I know that our teachers aren't going to stay in the classroom if they don't know how to work with students and work with people. So if they can handle both, they're really developing those skills. So thank you so much for all your work doing this program, and thank you for coming to present. At this time, we'll go ahead and open the hearing on Assembly Bill 184, which she is here. I was looking for it, which revises provisions relating to interscholastic activities. Assembly member, when you're ready.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chair Torres Fawcett, Vice Chair De Silva, and members of the Assembly Education Committee. It's nice to be home. It was tough for me to sit there and listen because I was like, oh, but excited. And the two questions were exactly like the ones I would have asked. So thank you for your service on this committee. It's incredibly important. My name is Natha Anderson, and it is my honor to represent Assembly District 30. I had asked Senator Edgar Flores of District, I forgot to write down a district, but I had asked Senator Flores to join me today, and I believe he's a little bit busy in the Senate. The reason why I had asked Senator Flores to join me today is because the bill I'm bringing forward is very similar to a bill that he had brought last session. It would be a Senate Bill 114. The language, however, I'm bringing has a little bit more to it, and so I'd like to just give you a little bit of background around it. As an educator, I know how incredibly important it is for our students to feel a connection to their school site. Sometimes that connection is through a teacher. Maybe that teacher is an English teacher, or a government and history teacher, or a geography teacher. Sometimes it is through your arts and your band and a debate club. I'm sure that's where all of you were. Most of the time, however, it's around sports. And as an individual who loves sports, and at one point, actually, I never played it, really. I was more of a I guess, splinter surfer. But as somebody that loves sport, that means I was a bench warmer. I love the idea of sports. And the reason why is because it brings everybody together. And you become a team. And there are very clear rules. There are very clear roles that everybody has. And I think the majority of individuals who are involved in sports in our state would agree with that. And high school sports are governed by the NIAA, or the Nevada Interscholastic Athletics Association, which is a nonprofit organization. And it's basically recognized by our body. And we have not always paid attention to the NIAA because there might be a few other things in education that might take a little bit more time and energy. However, when you talk with individuals, sometimes it is about the local issues, and sometimes it is about the sports. And so that's one reason why I'm bringing this forward. With its history, the NIAA was formed in 1922 to develop and enforce high school athletic welfare, safety standards, eligibility requirements, ethical conduct, which complement the academic work of students. I believe the NIAA does continue to attempt to do this. And what they do is they ensure that Nevada's student athletes engage in pure competition under uniform regulations. Unfortunately, that's where the issues are at this time. I'd like to show you very quickly. These are the 11 pages of rules the Nevada Legislature has taken up that has to do with the NIAA. This has to do with the regulations that are being followed. Just in context, because I did not go through and count it, and I was not smart enough to put the page numbers at the bottom, there are 9 pages of a table of contents of the regulations. There's an additional 4 pages of definitions versus 11 pages of rules that we have enacted as a Nevada State Legislature. So it kind of shows that the regulations have been in place, but they're not always being followed. And so I just want to imagine this scenario. The executive director and his or her staff takes an application for a possibility of a student who needs to transfer for a variety of reasons. They review that application. They then make a decision. They should be looking through the regulations. Many times it does, many times it does not. They have to then make a decision whether or not this situation warrants a hearing, and then the staff holds that hearing right away. Hopefully, but not always. Many times that hearing does not take place until after a season is over, possibly even another year. When you are a student that is a sophomore in high school, and you are loving the sport of lacrosse, and you miss that season, you only have one more season to go, because your junior year is what you missed. And for many of us that are kind of aware of what's happening with the university system, that junior year is when many people will be looking at how well you do. And then they will continue to look at your senior year. So losing one season of a 4-year time makes a huge difference. And it actually has done some harm to some of our students who just want to play their favorite sport. That's what they're about. Studies have shown that children that actually are engaged in high school sports have better academic performance, a more balanced social relationship, and they learn to cope with adversities. That's one reason why I was so involved in sports as a high schooler. Not just because my parents pushed me into it, or gently encouraged it, but more is because of the leadership skills and the ability to look beyond like my usual class that most of us had been in a similar class the whole time. It forced us to get out of our comfort zone sometimes. And as tennis great Billie Jean King said, sports teaches you characters. It teaches you to play by the rules, and it teaches you to know what it feels like to win and lose. It teaches you about life. Many times, students and families are not comfortable coming forward to a body like this to bring up this issue. They feel comfortable talking to a friend or somebody that they might know, but they're not comfortable coming to this setting or even the NIAA hearings because they're worried about retaliation. So we have to hear about it later, whether it's on the news, over getting your milk when you run into a neighbor, or even sometimes in a doctor's office. And this sort of reputation does not allow for the open communication that is needed to find a way to fix this issue. And I believe this is one of the reasons why these regulations are so cumbersome and so difficult, is because if you do know somebody that knows these regulations, they can tell you, well, have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? But if you do not, you just say, I guess I don't get a chance to play today. I actually had a mother call me 2 weeks ago from out of Las Vegas who was like, well, when will this be in place? Because this is the only thing keeping my child at school. Sports are the only thing that I'm able to help him stay in school. And I explained that the process and how our 120-day session works and how everything else works. And she said, well, he's a sophomore. Maybe when he's a senior, I can do this. It is that sort of ideas that kind of makes us see why this is so important. But this is also where the legislature comes into play and why it's so important for us to take this time and actually look at what we do as a legislature. We play a crucial role in providing oversights for states governing bodies like the NIAA. This oversight, I just said NIAA. Nope, that's right. This oversight ensures accountability, transparency, effective governance, and fair and consistent outcomes for our student athletes. The oversight allows us to balance what is needed to help our students and our communities. I don't know about you, but I have driven by Carson High School a few times, and I know that they are very proud of their state championships in the past. And I know I've been in many high school basketball or gyms, and when you look over and you see their banners, not to say anything about my alma mater of Reed High School, we've got a few, but we're nowhere near some others. You still have a sense of pride when you see that. When that is not available for everyone, based upon the ideas of how the transfer things are being done, that causes problems. If I may, Chair, I'd like to walk through the bones of the bill, as well as the amendment that has been uploaded to Nellis.
Please proceed.
Thank you. So first, we've got Section 2 of the bill, which addresses the possibility of retaliation against those schools, administrators, parents, or students who might bring up issues around the body. Section 3 deals with recruitment practices and the violations related to attempting to recruit a student to attend a school. This is for members of a school staff only. I wish we could address the alumni issue as well as others in the community who will push people to a specific school. But unfortunately, these trophy chasers are outside of the NIAA's purview and are a reality in many of our areas of sports. It is an issue which cannot be fixed through legislative language. Instead, we could possibly expect coaches and school administrators, as well as the NIAA, to practice the NIAA's sample code of sportsmanship conduct, In particular, number 2, the coach will teach, enforce, advocate, model, and promote the development of good sportsmanship and character to include trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, fairness, caring, and citizenship. In Section 4, this is where the transfer language is clearly stated as to eligibility when a student is enrolled in a new school. Too often, this waiver language seems to be not quite as clear or open to too many interpretations in the regulations. The proposed language in Section 4 would make it uniform for all. It does not matter if it is a traditional public school, a public charter school, a private school, or a homeschool. It would be for everyone. And this is probably the area where I've had the most conversations with individuals. There was a student a number of years ago who was going to a school and had a connection with sports. And because of that, he stayed in school. As a junior, he made a decision to take a science class. And he fell in love with science. And it was incredible to see him go from somebody that was just barely making grades to just excelling because of a science class. The teacher, who was also a coach, made a decision to transfer schools. The student wished to follow because of this specialized science program. The hearing did not take place until May of that child's senior year. So he was unable to participate in the sports program, and he was unable to follow that teacher into science. Luckily, there had been other connections, so there's another area around science. The only reason why I know that, though, is because of talking with individuals about it. You will notice there is a deletion of 4.2.k due to a conversation with a fellow assembly member on this committee who believed the language was just a little too broad. And after considering, I would agree with that. Section 4 further allows for a review process and the appeals process to the executive director. Section 5 and 6 continues to explain the appeal process beyond the hearing office. You will notice there is a general conceptual amendment related to this, as the Nevada Board of Education does not get involved in athletics. They might have a few more things on their plate as well. That would be, well, they do actually get involved in a little bit of athletics with requirement for PE, for graduation, which they should continue to have. In an attempt to recognize the different roles and not wanting to go directly to a court hearing or arbitration, we still wanted to have an elected body to consider the information. So the proposed amendment would be to allow for the local school district to be part of that. This was after some more discussions with others, and obviously more than happy to continue that discussion. Section 7 has the language around a school where a student is zoned for. After again speaking with members of this committee, there is amended language to reflect the awareness that there are a few school districts which have open enrollment. And so that would again be able to be reflected. This would be repeated in Section 9.2 as well. Section 8 finally has clarifying language, and Section 9 addresses the homeschooled students, as well as those schools which use a lottery system. In summation, we've identified a problem which needs improvements. And while AB 184 isn't a complete solution, it is a start. By taking out some of the guesswork, AB 184 will provide more consistency and less subjectivity, hopefully removing a perceived bias against a particular school or child and allowing decisions to be made upon state law, not arbitrarily or due to, well, I know somebody. I believe this bill will also foster stronger trust and encourage the NIAA to operate in alignment with legislative intent, ultimately enhancing the quality and services provided to student athletes and their families. I'm returning to the reason why the NIAA was started. In closing, I would again like to thank you for your time. And before opening it up to questions, I want to end it with a quote from Mike Singletary of the Chicago Bears, the Bears. Do you know what my favorite part of the game is? The opportunity to play. Please allow our students to play. At this time, I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I think we're going to have a couple questions, but I would like some clarification too, specifically for the appeals process. So where would the appeals process go with this amendment? Like, what is your vision of how that would work?
Thank you so much. So with the appeals process, I don't believe none of the, oh, thank you. Sorry, I was just looking at that. So when you take a look at additional language to 7.2, I believe is what you're asking about. No, I'm sorry.
Yes, because it deals with
Yes.
the
So
appeals.
you'll notice that there's more than a few times.
I apologize. I'm Assembly Member. Can you state your name for the record?
My apology to you, Assemblymember Anderson, for the record. So there's a few times when it states a school board or the board of directors. Let me see if I've got that number right in front of me. I had it before. Where it would be following. Let me see if I can find it. The first one that comes across is section 6.4. It's on page 7, lines 23 through 27. So any pupil or school that is aggrieved by a decision or order by a hearing officer may appeal to the state board. At this time, my thought was that this would be not the state board, but a school district board. So that would be, and that's around line 25, again on page 7. This also you'll see on page 6, under section 5. I'm sorry I did not make that clear in my remarks. Under section 5.2, lines 28 and 29, again has the state board referred to, and that's where the idea would be that we would actually utilize a school board, a local school board at this time.
Thank you. And then, I appreciate the intent of this legislation because I think that it's really to nail down on, these appeals process from NIA taking sometimes an entire season. In my other world, I'm an educator and I've watched appeals with the NIA take more than a season. And that's just obnoxious. And I think that our students deserve better, and that this isn't about money or who's getting paid, or whatever other politics that exists in the NIAA, which seem to be more than the politics in this building. But it's about making sure that our students are taken care of. I guess my concern is whether or not, with this amendment, it's just whether or not the school boards are the appropriate place for that to go. Because I don't know that a student, the school board meetings just have so many pieces of information to consider. And so I would love to see maybe, I know that you looked originally at the Department of, I think it was the state board, but perhaps like a task force designated by the state board that would review these as needed. And then like a representative, like a superintendent from that district should be a part of that. And I think that NAS might be interested in coming to the table to help work on something like that, just because I'm just concerned that the school board as a body is probably not where we want to have every single athletics issue.
Assemblymember Anderson, for the record, completely understand. And this is one area we struggled. When the Department of Education let us know that they are not part of athletics at all, this was what we punted to. Sports pun. This is what we attempted to think about. At the same time, it's very open. I'm completely open to working with other groups and utilizing the superintendents would completely make sense, especially with the time frame and how quickly we would like to be able to get these hearings through. Thank you so much for that idea, and I will be in contact with them right away.
Thank you. Assemblymember LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this. Thank you to my colleague for his help. So my question is on Section 3, specifically about the recruitment. I see that in sub 6A through B, you talk about what recruitment means, right? Persuading or pressuring, etc. However, in sub 4, it says, for the purposes of subsection 3, in any hearing held pursuant thereto, any evidence that a pupil has moved to a residence owned, leased, or provided by otherwise associated person is the only proof of athletic recruitment. And so my question is, does that need to change to match the definitions? I just wondered why that is listed as the only proof for athletic recruitment occurring.
Assemblymember Anderson, for the record, and thank you for bringing that up. I think that with our discussions, with the 4 or 5 people that I've been working on with this, that was something that we had not even considered. So more than happy to I'm completely open to thinking of some other areas to show how this recruitment is taking place. Thank you so much for bringing that forward. Greatly appreciate that question and that consideration.
Yes, follow up.
Thank you so much. My second question is actually a more general question just about the issue of, do you know approximately how many students are being negatively impacted by this process? I know that's not a number you might have off the top of your head, but is it in the range of dozens, hundreds?
Assemblymember Anderson, thank you for asking for that question. I think it's similar to there's no way to know. Because unfortunately, it's very similar to when we started eons ago dealing with some social media bullying. When people were like, well, how many people are being impacted? There's this almost sometimes a sense of shame to have to report something that you're not being treated fairly by some people. And that's both in the bullying tactic, but then also sometimes with this. There's also sometimes a feeling of, well, that's just the way life goes. And for some of our students, sports is so great, but already it's just one element of their life. And so they think, well, maybe I just won't spend my time on this sport anymore. So now I'll start doing this. And in the process of doing that secondary thing, for example, a student that I know of that was one of my students who was involved in sports and then because of moving was not able to be involved in it. He got a job, which was great for his family and for him, but not when they start making him work 40 hours. And then he gave up the sport. The following year, he could have tried out. He made the decision not to because he already had a job. Those aren't going to be reported because this situation, this is not always something that is always going to be known to us. Unfortunately, it's about right now the issues coming up because of other conversations that have taken place. We don't know how many people are hiding this issue. Thank you for asking that question, though.
Thank you.
Also, I think other counties, I'm so sorry, other counties will have different ways of dealing with it as well.
Thank you. I know I have a couple members with questions. So first I'm going to go to Assemblymember DeLong, and then I'll go to Assemblymember I'll go to Assemblymember Orentlicker, and then Assemblymember Mosca. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate you doing the presentation. Really appreciate the bill because this issue hits really close to home. My daughter's school, she was at a religious school last year, it closed. And so she had to transfer schools. She wanted to swim this year, but couldn't. The waiver process is almost impossible to deal with. And so something needs to be fixed. And so as it relates to that, Section 4, subsection 2 is really about the things that are considered to basically get a waiver. I think the closing of your school should probably be maybe a new K. But the other thing to think about is, should the waiver be presumptive? Meaning, if you file an application that supports your waiver, it's presumed to be correct, and the NIAA has X amount of time to review and deny it. And if they don't do it within that time frame, you automatically get the waiver. That way, everyone is ensured that they know the time frame, and you then have the potential to eliminate this loss of a season issue. So, my thoughts. Thank you, Chair.
Through Assemblymember Anderson, through the chair.
Feel free to go directly to the
Thank
member.
you. I should have asked that before earlier. Sorry about that. Thank you, first of all, for letting us know about the student. You had told me that there was a personal, then you didn't tell me the story, so I greatly appreciate that, and the closing of the school would make sense. I mean, we do have, there's a program changing, but the entire school changing would make sense to add to it. The presumptive information was one that you had brought up to me yesterday, and I had not had a chance to talk with some other people about it. It would make sense because then that way we can start to do it. we can start having somebody play right away, and then that way the hearing becomes much more important to have. The only issue that I could see, and I'm just putting this out here right now, is let's say that you are playing on a championship team and you've made it, and you've applied for that transfer, and your third game you're still playing, incredibly important, you win it. The fourth game, the hearing comes back that no, this is not accurate. Does that mean that that entire season would no longer be happening? And so I think that's something. At the same time, I feel that that is something I could speak with the individuals I've been working with on this a little bit more, and also would make some people of the hearing officers be a little bit quicker about getting that information out. We got to get that done quicker. So, and I think that really illustrates the point that the chair was bringing up earlier about maybe the school board is not the best thing to do. Maybe it is instead working with some other groups about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Ortlicker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Assembly Member, for bringing this bill. I admire your eloquent enthusiasm for sports and all the positive things it can do, because you're right, it can do wonders for a lot of students. And a number of the provisions, in the bill sections, the one about retaliation for communication is very important, and transfers. I must say, though, seeing the need for Section 3 is in some ways distressing. Oh my God, it's bad enough at the collegiate level how sports has become so professionalized. And some of the things you talked about sports complementing the academics and teaching you to play by the rules. And what we've seen so much is the tail wagging the dog, sports at the collegiate level. That's all that matters, transferring from one school to another for the athletic opportunities, and maybe not so much teaching you to play by the rules, but teaching you to do whatever you can to win. And to see Section 3, oh my God, now we have this at the high school level. Are we doing enough? I'm glad you've got Section 3, but are we doing enough to prevent this professionalization at the high school and level and earlier? I mean, we know there are kids who, the traveling sports teams, and anyway. I don't know if you did say at some point that's maybe beyond us, but are we doing enough?
Assemblymember Anderson, for the record, thank you for bringing that up. It's how you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. This is the beginning of that bite that we can do in the legislative process. I think the larger questions, I think, has to go back with how we handle it in our classrooms, how we handle it at home. I'm going to tell you a quick story, if I may, about my mother, who was was an amazing fourth grade teacher. She was teaching in a classroom that was very difficult. The student was acting out, especially during football season, and so she finally had the parent-teacher-student conference about what was happening, and the one of the parents came in and said, well, my son's going to be a pro football player. It's okay. It's okay. You don't need to worry about it. And it just kept on happening. And finally, the fourth time, she looked at him and said, great, I'll be his accountant then. Don't you think he might need to learn how to read a contract? Don't you think he might need to learn how to do the math? And the parent looked at her and said, and I mean, my mom is kind of a short, feisty person, in case you were wondering. And he looked at her and he said, what do you mean? She goes, I'll just do your contract for the next 2 weeks too. Let's try to figure out whether or not you get your full payment or not as a pro football player. And he went, understand, Mrs. Anderson? And the next day, no problems at all. And I think that is what we need to do as society and culture with each other, is we just need to bring up the realities. How are we working with each other? So I do agree with you. It also concerns me. I think about all the different college coaches that refuse to put up a banner and tell everybody from the team graduated and all those other things. That's not a reality now. But that doesn't mean that we have to allow that to happen in our schools today. And we can at least take one bite out of this elephant in this room. Thank you.
Assemblymember Mosca.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you so much for Assembly Member, especially for meeting with all of us before the hearing. I thought that was very helpful, and my original question was very similar to both of my colleagues, so I thank you also for speaking to that principal who had brought up some issues to me about it. So my question this time will then really be, have you seen examples, or what are the examples, maybe one or two, of retaliation, and how would this bill help that? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Anderson, for the record. The retaliations that have happened, there are at least two that I know of, where a coach, there was one time where there was no retaliations, where somebody just basically got a slap on the wrist and was like, oh, it's okay, you're all right. But then the other retaliations that have happened has been different officials have been assigned to that look at very, very, very specific things that are not always as well known. And I know that sounds really weird, but that is actually a big part of sports. And then a second item that I know has happened where there were then other hearings that were never taking place because it was a similar school site, and those hearings were never scheduled until after the schedule, until after the season was over. That's those sort of items. The other thing is sometimes that our athletic directors need to be able to have candid conversations with NIAA, and there are times when some athletic directors are not always able to do so. The increase against our referees, even though I just said that, have been advanced, and you can see that across the nation, but it's also happening against our coaches. And so we need to do better about that. So it's those sort of little tiny things that are taking place. Thank you.
And members, any additional questions? I'm going to go to Assemblymember Hardy. Thank you. And then Assemblymember Ortlicker.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for bringing this bill in your presentation. And you can really tell your care for students and your passion about this. So, I agree with you when you said, and it's unfortunate that, most kids and parents, it happens. And like you said, if you don't know somebody, they just say, well, I guess that's just, I have to deal with it. So how would you see, like, this law passes and then, the situation happens? How do you see, like, a student or a parent would know what to do instead of just saying, I don't know, there's a law that can help me? Where would they go? Is it someone in the school? And then how would they know to, like you said, just be like, well, I'm embarrassed, or I don't know what to do? How do you see them being informed?
Assemblymember Anderson, for the record, what a great question, Assemblymember Hardy. Thank you. No, wait, I already got permission. Thank you so much for asking that, because this should be part of all of our NIAA handbooks. But I don't know about you, but when I play sports, I was like, that's nice. So that's one item that we need to have a little bit clearer. The second item, however, that needs to be a little bit clearer is both through the counselors when they go into a new school site. This is actually mentioned that if a counselor believes that there are some issues, the counselor is involved in it. So when a student comes into a new school and shows an interest in sports, which happened actually last year of a student that I know about, they went and talked with their counselor about it, and they said, basketball is what I love. How do I get involved? Our counselors, even though they have huge numbers, it's something like 400 to 1, they know who to talk with about this. So making sure counselors have that information is number one. Number two, obviously, the athletic directors will be very much aware of it. So parents being informed, guardians being informed. And I would say that most of our parents and guardians that are helping a child in sports are very informed about it. And so knowing that connection with the counselor and administrator makes all the difference. Thank you.
Assemblymember, just a quick follow-up on that. I think, in my experience working at schools, I think, the biggest advocate for the student athletes is definitely the coaches and the athletic directors. I think it should be a requirement that it's a part of, like, the coaches, whatever, like, coaches training and coaches requirement that's probably more appropriate than school counselors. And we could just make sure that once an appeal is processed through the NIAA or it's submitted to the NIAA, that the NIAA has to respond back, like provide them with their rights too, so that people have their rights. We should also require the NIAA to have these posted on the website, just so that it's easily accessible to families and students if they have an issue. Thank you. And we're going to continue with questions. Assemblymember Ornt-Licker.
Yes, thank you. And also about the recruitment, but a different thing I want to make sure about. I know that when it comes to, so when I look at the kinds of things that are limited, it's, when I think of the kind of recruitment that's restricted at the collegiate level, it has to do with number of visits and money and conduct. This is about speech. And I know we're the state, and these are most of them, a lot of them are public employees, and they have limited rights, but some of these are private teachers who, so we're the state talking about what private high school coaches can say. So I'm curious about the First Amendment. Are there First Amendment concerns that we need to worry about?
Assemblymember Anderson, for the record, thank you. I honestly had not even thought about the First Amendment speeches and how First Amendment speech and the protection of it. More than happy to work with you on some other language to make that very clear.
Assemblymember Anderson, I'm going to go ahead and defer to our legal counsel at this time since it's a question about the First Amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, committee. Oh, sorry about that. Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, committee counsel. So generally, the First Amendment does protect personal speech. The First Amendment does not necessarily extend to speech as part of your job, particularly when you're a public employee. I think your question is more directed to the fact that private high schools participate in NIAA, and so there potentially could be employees of private high schools whose speech would be limited by this prohibition on recruiting. In the end, First Amendment challenges are usually subject to a balancing test where there is a balancing of the speech seeking to be limited against the public purpose, the public policy behind the limitation of that speech. In this case, we think it's probably likely that a court would find that the public policy of prohibiting this kind of recruiting activity would outweigh this relatively minimal burden on a prohibition of particular speech as an employee of a private school. We believe that would be defensible. I'm not aware of any court cases specifically on that subject, so it's possible a court could find differently, but we believe that there is at least sufficient basis to defend that based on existing First Amendment jurisprudence.
Thank you. And we're going to keep Mr. Killian on his feet because I do have another question for him. I know in the past when we brought legislation that has to do with the NIAA, that we have received opposition that says that the legislature doesn't have the ability to provide oversight over the NIAA. Can you provide some clarity on what our role is in providing this oversight, especially given that tax dollars are used to help fund this organization, as it's our student fees that are going into this program? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Asher Killian, Committee Counsel. Yes, so the legislature has made the choice in enacting NRS 385B-050 to delegate to a nonprofit association the powers that would ordinarily fall to the school districts of this state to control, supervise, and regulate interscholastic athletic events. The fact that a previous legislature has made this choice does not bind this current legislature or any future legislature. At any time, the legislature could, and I'll preface this by saying that it's unusual for a nonprofit corporation to be able to exercise what would otherwise be the powers of the state or a state agency. That doesn't mean it's prohibited, it just means it's unusual what the legislature has chosen to do in this case. If the legislature were to choose in the future to revoke those powers from the NIAA or to repeal or amend 385B-050 to abolish the NIAA and instead have local governments or a state entity exercise those powers, that would be entirely within the province of the legislature, and the NIAA would have no power to demand that it retain those powers if the legislature chose by law to invest those state powers in some other entity.
Yeah, I've heard that other states do that, and maybe that's something that we consider, right? Maybe we can consider as a public body just eliminating the NIAA and creating our own agency to oversee sports. So, I mean, that's something that we might look to in the long run, so that it can really be within the purview of the state. Yeah, it's something I'm going to continue to do my research on. So at this time, are there any other questions? It doesn't appear there are any, so we will invite anyone wishing to testify in support.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Ali Caliendo. That's ALICALIENDO. I am the founder and executive director of Foster Kinship, and we support all of the children in kinship care. There's about 30,000 in our state. The majority are not in foster care. So we see quite a bit of students who are not able to participate in sports who are in temporary guardianships. So certainly we think this is very needed. And we just want to also ensure that under Section 4, students who are not subject to 432B or 159A, which is minor guardianship, but are in the process of potentially obtaining those things, would also be subject to a waiver. So specifically temporary guardianships with a relative that require placement difference outside of their current school district, but you know, I want to make sure they're covered. I'm sure the intention is to cover those kids as well, so we're in support. Thank you.
Steve Dolan. I'm in support of this essentially because as a father of a gifted child, my son was number 3 in the United States, or number 1 in the United States in hitting home runs his freshman year in high school. And you can imagine the recruitment that went on, including the Mets. We filled out a form that said that how many children do you have for the Mets, because they thought he was an adult in their recruitment forms. All of the high schools were recruiting him. And so in order to kind of curtail this recruitment process, we learned that we had to move in order for him to go to a different school. We had to move. It wasn't going to be carte blanche, go. Assemblyman DeLong, I agree with you about a school closing, that should be an absolute just go. You know, that's a pass. You can certainly go to the school you want to and swim and work in athletics. But I appreciate everyone listening to this and considering it, because the pressure on my son was huge. When it came down to his senior year, I explained to him that everybody wanted him to be a superstar, but I wanted him to follow his heart, and he graduated with a degree in marine science. And you can't play baseball underwater. So I thought that was a kind of a good deterrent, a measure of how a family wants to engage their child's future through sports, which we believe is absolutely incredible for the children. But putting a couple of roadblocks
Thank you, and
in
if you
the
could
way.
please conclude your testimony.
Thank you very much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
your time.
I don't see anybody else here in Las Vegas wishing to testify in support. Is there anyone or I apologize, we're in Carson City. I don't see anyone here in Carson City. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to testify in support? I don't see anyone at this time. BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in support?
If you would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 184, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller ending in 594, you are unmuted and may begin when ready.
Yes, good afternoon. For the record, my name is Yusila Coet, Usila, last name Koech. I'm calling from Las Vegas, Nevada. And I'm calling in support of AP 184. My son transferred from a private school to a regular school in 2023-2024 year. My mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. We had to make a choice of either keeping my son in private school or supporting my mother, who passed away last year. And through the NAIA and the rules and everything else that we went through, it was horrible. The appeal process took a whole year, and it was my son's senior year in high school. This rule for the 1 year transfer rule was done for a private school in Southern Nevada over 20 years ago. And that school has moved on to recruit kids from out of state. A kid from Ohio, California, or any other place will move to Nevada and is able to play. But a kid moving from Liberty to Desert Oasis is not allowed to play. Utah allows transfers, 30 days wait for the athletes, and their student athletes are thriving. And we also have heard that sports allows kids to be resilient, disciplined. It helps them in the classroom. It helps them build relationships in a community. The NIA should vote now to allow the transfers, and also the implementation should be by June 30th, 2025. You heard that when we asked for the data during my son's appeal to find out how many kids in Southern Nevada, because I'm a former student athlete at UNLV, Go Rebels, and we found out that there was no data. But when we spoke to a lot more parents, there's even a Facebook group, there's a lot more numbers of people that are afraid to come out because of retaliation and stuff like that. The charter schools without facilities and magnet schools should allow kids to play in their own schools, and that should not be considered a transfer. They should also reduce the amount of paperwork and language, which is a huge barrier when doing the RMA, which is to register my athlete through the system of the NAIA. Even for those of us that have college degrees, it's very, very complex, and the paperwork is just.
Thank you, ma'am.
There was a divorce. They want the whole divorce decree.
Ma'am, thank you so much for your testimony. We did receive a copy of it, so I will make sure just members know that it has already been posted on now, so please make sure you review it. Thank you so much for your testimony and for your support. BPS, is there anyone else on the line in support of this bill?
Yes, Chair, one moment.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and Assembly members. My name is Alex Belto. I would be there in person, but I'm under the weather and don't want to risk getting anybody sick. I strongly support AB 184 and thank Assemblymember Anderson for bringing it forward. As an attorney, I've represented many student athletes navigating the NIAA's burdensome process and oftentimes arbitrary hardship and transfer process. I think this bill is necessary for 3 reasons. First, most students cannot afford to challenge NIAA hardship rulings in a hearing with an attorney. The current regulations and statutes give the NIAA unfettered discretion, forcing students to prove their case before an arbitrator, oftentimes in the final week of a season or even after the season. By creating clear hardship guidelines and a functional timeline, students won't lose opportunities to play sports. Second, even when the NIAA loses an appeal, it changes regulations to avoid future losses. With no legal guardrails, the NIAA can rewrite rules at will, and there is a legitimate fear of retaliation for those who do prevail in appeals. I know this from past conduct of the NIAA and from statements made to me by NIAA attorneys who make clear if they lose at a hearing, they'll just rewrite the rules. Third, I've had a lot of cases that would illustrate why this bill is important, but I want to share one specific example. I represented a young girl who transferred schools after she faced severe bullying for coming out to her friends. She also came from a religious household and wasn't ready to share her identity with her father. Despite knowing this, the NIA insisted on a hearing, one that it would have forced her to out herself to her family at a time she was not ready to do that. Thankfully, her new school intervened, and I was able to get involved so I could assist her. but most students wouldn't have that support. AB 184 would prevent these types of injustices by creating clear standards and evidence that would be sufficient to prove a hardship to prevent students who are bullied from being precluded to transfer and play sports. So I urge you to support this bill, and I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Mr. Velta, I have a quick question. Mr. Velta, are you still on the line? I have a quick question.
Sure.
So I just want to clarify. So you, as an attorney, have had to represent students with NIAA appeals?
Yes, I've represented multiple students through the NIAA process.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I just can't imagine an appeals process being so challenging that you need attorneys to represent you so that you can go out and play. Thank you. VPS, is there anyone else on the line wishing to testify in support of AB 184?
Chair, we have no additional callers to provide support testimony at this time.
Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and go to oppositions. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in opposition? I don't see anyone, so I will go ahead and go to Las Vegas. And I do believe I have representatives from the NIAA. So I can give you extended time. Obviously, we'll cap it at 10 minutes, but I will go ahead and just allow you to share your remarks as well so that we can have a fair and balanced hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Tim Jackson. I'm the current executive director of the NIAA. I'm going to read a prepared statement. The Nevada Interscholastic Activities Association and the Board of Control support new transfer regulations for member schools, but do not endorse Assembly Bill 184. Over the past 2 years following the last legislative session, the NIAA has worked diligently to develop a new transfer regulation. This regulation has been approved by the NIAA Board of Control and is currently under review by the LCB. Significant effort was made to finalize this regulation ahead of the current legislative session, but unfortunately it was not completed in time for implementation. Our opposition to AB 184 stems from multiple factors. The bill largely replicates regulations already established within the Nevada Administrative Code that governs the NIAA. In many cases, these existing regulations go beyond what AB 184 proposes. A key concern with AB 184 is its misalignment with the NIAA's adherence to the NAC, particularly introducing the local Board of Education as an appellate authority. The bill includes a provision for an expedited appeal to the Board of Education, but this entity operates in an entirely different capacity. The Board of Education has no involvement in, awareness of, or familiarity with the NIAA member schools or its regulations. There is also the concern that not all member schools operate under the guidance of a Board of Education. Transfers are not specific to public schools, as private, charter, and homeschool students present unique and dynamic complexities. AB 184 would be codified into state law under NRS, eliminating the NIAA's ability to regulate, adapt, or modify the policies to meet the evolving needs of our members. The strength of the NIAA lies in its flexibility and regulatory framework, which allows for timely adjustments based on the needs of our member schools. With a deep understanding of its regulations and their implementation, the NIAA remains committed to maintaining its expertise in this area, and expertise that our membership depends upon. For these reasons, the NIAA is not in support of AB 184. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do believe I have a question. Assemblymember Ruhach.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being here to explain these new rules to us. So can you just walk us through the rules that you have proposed for transfers and where they are similar or different from the bill that we are considering?
Timothy Jackson, for the record. I would also like to bring up one of my assistant directors, if that would be okay, to sit over here to my right. She is our expert in eligibility and transfers. Her name is Miss Kate Segroi, S-G-R-O-I. She is also willing to testify in any manner which is necessary. The new regulation is what we're referring to as a one-time transfer. It's very similar to what it was proposed prior to the session, where instead of there being a litany of regulations that require students to do X, Y, and Z, they will establish themselves with initial eligibility at the school they attend. For example, when you transition from 8th grade to 9th grade, if you go to your residentially zoned school and participate in athletics, you have established Any student at that point would have one transfer available to them to leave that school, and if available and enrolled in another school, their eligibility would be granted. They would have one transfer. That way, if a student starts at one school and the situation arises where it's not tenable, they have gone to perhaps a magnet school and the program is not what they thought it would be. Previously, you would lose your eligibility by transferring out to another school. Now you would maintain your eligibility and be able to transfer to another school. Likewise with a charter school, a private school, or any other combination therein. It gives our student athletes the flexibility to look at the situation and say, this doesn't work. I need to move to a different location for me. It does not take out the safeguards that we have in place. For example, if a school closes, then you do have eligibility at the new school, depending on the programs they offer. But it also allows the student then to say, I didn't use my one-time transfer for that purpose. I moved to a different school. If a parent or a family unit is relocated from one area to another, that does not utilize their one-time transfer. Legitimate moves will always be granted. So it's a little bit, what it does is it takes away all of the outside influences that we have been seeing in eligibility transfers and puts it into one simplified regulation that allows a student and a family to make a choice that is better for them.
Members, any other questions or points of clarification? Can you talk about the current protocols and procedures for recruitment and whether or not that's impacted? I haven't had time to review this document. I did just take a look at this proposed regulation, but I'm just wondering if you can kind of go over it a little bit.
If it pleases the committee, I'm going to defer to Mr. Groy on that.
Kate Segroy, for the record, Assistant Director of the NIAA. So currently we have several regulations that cover recruitment. They mirror very, very closely to what this bill states. And we feel that our current regulations do sufficiently address recruiting. We have penalties that are mentioned very similarly to what is in this bill. And so that's part of why I am in opposition, because we do already address this very thoroughly in our regulations. Thank you.
Okay, and then I was wondering if you could just walk through a couple things that were brought up during the hearing. How many requests for appeal did you receive, and then how many appeals hearings did you have to have?
If we're talking about this year, we've had for the fall and winter season thus far 14. We've had two of those were for this upcoming spring season. And the process for appealing is based a lot on the timeline as far as when the parents actually submit their transfer request. The turnaround for making a decision on that transfer request is quick, always under a week. If they do get denied and want to go with that level 2 hearing, they are informed in their denial how to do that, how to contact our office and do that. As soon as they contact us, we begin scheduling as soon as they give us their written request, as well as the fee. If they're free and reduced lunch, they don't have to pay the fee, so it's also a part of that process. And as soon as they either pay the fee and do the request, or if they have free and reduced lunch, we go to schedule that with the hearing officer, and we get them scheduled usually within a week or two of when the request comes in. And then our regulations do allow for 10 days for the hearing officer to make his decision. So that's where it could be extended a little bit longer, but typically he gets them done pretty quickly. So the process is outlined very specifically in our regulations, and I feel that we do a good job of getting those done as quickly as possible. But again, if parents are not submitting their transfer request until the season's already begun, of course, that's going to extend the process. So getting them done quickly can help that. Our registration process for the upcoming school year always opens in May of the previous school year. So they have several months to submit their paperwork for any sport, fall, winter, or spring, starting in May of the previous school year. Thank you.
So how many days is that process or timeline total?
If a family is denied and the denial, let's say, happens...
I apologize. And for the record, could you please state your name?
Sorry, Kate Segroy, for the record. It really depends again on the timeline as far as when the family submits the transfer. But once that transfer is in our queue, under a week typically to get that denial, if it's a denial, and then scheduling again, if they immediately that same day call our office to schedule and request for that, we will typically get it scheduled within 2 weeks, pretty much at the latest. So let's say that's 3 weeks, and then the hearing officer has 2 weeks to make his decision. So if you're doing that prior to the season beginning, you can get full eligibility if you win your appeal before the season starts.
I think
however, if they are waiting to submit that, it takes longer.
Thank you. And I think that actually just states the issue. I mean, if you have a process that takes 5 weeks, I mean, these seasons are not that long. It's a quarter, right? So it's about 9 weeks. I mean, that is a significant amount of time. And if the team isn't going to make it to regionals, or they're not making it to state, then, those seasons are really quick. I think about my husband's a wrestling coach, and that wrestling season is right after Thanksgiving, and then it's over by February. So that would have been basically the entire season. I'm sure your guys' office was closed for Christmas. So they would have just missed the season, right? And so I think that actually is the exact challenge. And so I would love to receive a copy of that regulation that has to do with the timeline. And, I understand they can do it before. The reality is kids aren't thinking about sports, and families aren't thinking about sports until it's time to play sports. And so, things happen, life circumstances happen. We've seen students have to move mid-school year, and I just want to make sure that they have the tools to be successful. So if we can get a copy of those, those regulations to the committee staff, that would be really helpful. Additionally, I think you do have additional remarks. If you wanted to read your remarks into the record too, feel free. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Kate Scory, Assistant Director of the NIA. I'm here speaking in opposition to Assembly Bill 184. The NIA works diligently to maintain fair and equitable regulations, and we believe this bill is unnecessary and could undermine the integrity of high school athletics in Nevada. Section 3 of AB 184 addresses recruiting. However, existing Nevada Administrative Code already cover this issue comprehensively. We strongly believe our current regulations sufficiently address recruiting. Section 4 outlines ways students may transfer and retain full eligibility, most of which are already permitted under current regulations and practices, creating redundancy. However, we do have concern with subsections I and J, which cite mental health and financial hardship as qualifying factors for automatic eligibility. This creates a roadmap for families to claim eligibility, which undermines our current practices that ensure fairness by evaluating hardship claims individually, removing our ability to determine whether a hardship indeed exists and is directly related to the need for a transfer, compromises the integrity of the eligibility process. The NIA has undertaken a thorough review, amendment, and restructuring of its transfer regulations in response to concerns raised during the last legislative session. These updates have been thoroughly vetted by NIA committees, member schools, and the Board of Control over the last year, and we are awaiting final review with hopes of implementation next school year. Section 7.2 would allow full eligibility to students living out of zone. This is allowed under the currently pending one-time transfer regulation. The vague wording in this section suggests students may transfer eligibility to any school without being enrolled, which would significantly disrupt the structure of high school athletics. Additionally, Sections 7 and 9 give preferential treatment to charter schools and others using lottery systems, contradicting existing statutes promoting equity among school types. Section 7.3c would also open unrestricted transfers for ninth graders, which is unnecessary given existing regulations allow initial eligibility at any school, as well as the pending one-time transfer. The NIA, Board of Control, and member schools have collaborated extensively to refine our regulations. Given these pending changes, we respectfully urge the committee to vote against AB 184, as many concerns it seeks to address have already been sufficiently resolved. Additionally, certain provisions of the bill would negatively impact the integrity of high school athletics in Nevada. In short, this bill would force the NIA to be reactive when our goal is to remain proactive. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Assemblymember DeLong has a quick question.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this should be relatively quick. Did I understand in these proposed regulations that you're currently processing that there's the ability for a student to do a transfer without any restrictions?
I would need a little. Oh, sorry, Tim Jackson for the record. Could you clarify what you're referring?
You had, I believe, previously stated that there was this one-time ability to transfer schools.
Tim Jackson for the record.
Without
yes,
any
that's what
process.
We're waiting. Yeah, we're waiting for that to be approved. That would be the case. So what would occur would be the student would be allowed to one-time transfer to another school, so long as they were able to enroll in that school.
That to me sounds
without
like
without any restrictions.
okay. That sounds like a great way to encourage recruiting. So thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody else in Las Vegas wishing to testify in opposition to AB 184? I do not see anybody else in Las Vegas. BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in opposition to AB 184?
Thank you, Chair. If you would like to provide opposition testimony to AB 184, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. There are no callers wishing to provide opposition testimony at this time.
Thank you. At this time, I'll invite anyone wishing to testify neutral. I do not see anybody here in in Carson City, and I do not see anybody in Las Vegas. BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify neutral?
Thank you. If you would like to offer neutral testimony to AB 184, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 241. Please press star 6 to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Danielle Ford, former Clark County School District trustee and current Nevada State Board of Education member, calling as an individual. And
can you please spell your name for the record?
Neutral,
Thank you.
I just got a chance to call in, but I wanted to.
Miss Ford, Miss Ford, could you please, Miss Ford, could you spell your name for the record? I apologize. Thank you.
Danielle Ford.
Yes, if you could spell it for the record. Thank you. For the secretaries. Thank you.
Oh, okay. DanielleFord.
Thank you.
Thanks. I just wanted to give a little bit of my experience based on the conversation I was hearing today. And that while I haven't been on the Clark County School District Board in a couple of years, I don't know if anything has changed. In the 4 years that I served on it, this was one of the biggest issues that I saw. And it's kind of one of the things that haunts me because I can't think of a single student that I was able to personally help be able to transfer to a different school. And the reasons that I ran into with a lot of families, and by the way, when somebody reaches out to the trustee, it's not like your first line. It's because they went through a bunch of different methodologies and were unsuccessful and are kind of reaching out as a last hope. But a lot of the reasons why that I saw students transferring in the middle of the year were usually very unexpected. They weren't prepared. It's not like a family was planning on moving and they had researched the new school and found out the proper procedure. It was usually very chaotic, and it was economic hardship, things like eviction, divorce, often moving to the other families have domestic violence. And a lot of the time, these families don't have the bandwidth to go through the whole process, where they find out what that process is going to be, and they're like, well, we just can't do that right now. So I did see this as a big issue, and I just wanted to share that it does feel to me like it is a local school board issue, or at least it should be, especially like Clark County, where there's so many different aspects to consider and different reasons why things might be happening. I just wanted to share that another option you could look into is possibly emulating what they do with juvenile justice appeals. And I served on that committee. It's a committee that most people don't know exists, and it is comprised of 2 trustees and somebody from the DA's office. So maybe it could be 2 trustees and some sort of athletic director or something. And it's private, and it's when a student, doesn't get an appeal or, sent back to school if they're expelled and they disagree with it. And that process actually moves kind of fast. So that's something to look into, maybe building or putting in some language that would establish
Thank you.
a
Thank you, Ms. Ford. I
you know,
apologize. That
athletic
is time.
appeal
Thank
committee.
you.
Yep. I think you get the gist. Thank you very much.
Thank you. BPS, is there anyone else on the line wishing to testify in neutral?
There are no further callers to offer neutral testimony at this time.
Thank you. At this time, we'll invite Assemblymember Anderson to provide any concluding remarks.
Thank you, Chair Torres Fawcett. Nathan Anderson for the record. Again, thank you so much for listening, for considering this information, but more importantly, for the questions and for the ideas. I'm more than happy to work with anybody. The individuals from the NIAA, we played phone tags for a few weeks. Finally, we got a chance to talk last night. I'm more than happy to work with others. So let's just bring something forward so we can let kids play. Thank you very much for that much time and energy that you all are expanding towards it.
Thank you. At this time, we'll go ahead and close the hearing on AB 184. And we will go ahead and go to the last item on our agenda, which is public comment. Each person has 2 minutes to provide testimony. Public comment may be submitted to the committee up to 24 hours after the hearing. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in public comment? Please begin when you're ready. Thank you.
John Eppolito, Protect Nevada Children. Most people here probably realize free ed tech vendors are not really free. They are paid with our children's data. Parents will never see that data or the profiles these free ed tech vendors create on our children. In 2019, a 9th grade student in Reno took a 3-question quiz while at school on Kahoot, a free ed tech vendor. Quiz title, Should I Kill Myself? The next day, Caleb Stenvold committed suicide. Here's the local NBC News story about this. Reno mom, the title, Reno mom says app used in school contributed to her son's suicide. I'll email you the story. After the suicide, it took 9 months to get Kahoot out of Washoe schools. At that time, Kahoot was owned by an overseas vendor. Since then, Goldman Sachs, General Atlantic, and at least one overseas entity have taken control of Kahoot. Why do you think private equity firms are buying up these free edtech vendors? More questions. Why is Kahoot still on the CCSD safe list? And what would it take to get them off that list? Who has access to the results of other Nevada students who took Kahoot suicide quizzes? More importantly, will this affect the future of those kids? Who's monitoring what Nevada students are doing with their district-issued devices and on these free edtech vendors' sites? Since Caleb's suicide, his mother started Forever14.org, a teen suicide prevention program. You are in a position to protect Nevada children. Google has 15 paid lobbyists here in Carson City this session. Please quit listening to Google and other edtech vendors and do what you know is best for our children. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Steve Dolan, Incline Village. I've known John for many years and worked with him back when my children were in school in 2015 through 2019, I suppose. And I know that this third vendor sale of student data is going on, and the FBI is aware of it. And I just would back Mr. Eppolito with his constant vigilance for Protect Nevada Children and that group and all of Nevada children. I'd just like to give him a little prop for doing what he's doing, and I know for a fact that the data is being sold on third-party areas, and that should be a review for this committee whenever thinking about new programs. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. I don't see anybody coming to speak in public comment in the packed room we have in Las Vegas. BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in public comment?
Thank you, Chair. The public lines are open and working. However, there are no callers to provide public comment at this time.
Are there any comments from members before we adjourn? All right, we are still working on our agenda for the next Tuesday meeting, but I know that it'll be posted a couple days in advance. Seeing there's no further business before us, this committee is adjourned.